Members of the Assembly, thank you for convening. Today we examine a challenge that every modern nation faces, yet few have addressed with honesty or urgency. The global workforce is increasingly dependent on night shifts, rotating rosters, and extended duty cycles that strain the human body far beyond what it was designed to endure. Behind the functioning of every city, there are workers who sacrifice sleep, circadian stability, and long-term health, so society can continue to operate. For decades, these sacrifices have been normalized. They have been treated as an unavoidable cost of progress. But the evidence is now overwhelming. Chronic fatigue, impaired cognition, cardiovascular deterioration, increased accident risk, and long-term neurological strain are not abstract risks. They are measurable, preventable outcomes. The current system asks human beings to absorb the damage. Safe health zones propose a different direction. They introduce structured recovery spaces, scientifically aligned with circadian requirements, designed to interrupt the progression from fatigue to injury. They represent an acknowledgement that night work is not simply a scheduling pattern. It is a biological hazard that requires a modern safety response. Our task today is not to defend the concept, nor to oppose it. We will analyze whether safe health zones are feasible, whether the model is scalable, whether the expected benefits justify the investment, and whether this framework can serve as a blueprint for national and international occupational health reform. If safe health zones represent a genuine structural solution to a documented health crisis, then the Assembly must recognize that. If there are shortcomings or blind spots, then they must be exposed so the model can evolve. The world is entering a period where worker welfare, productivity, and public health are increasingly interdependent. Nations that fail to reform will face rising healthcare burdens and declining workforce resilience. Nations that act early will gain stability. This Assembly stands at the beginning of that discussion. Let us proceed with clarity, evidence, and integrity. Let us establish whether safe health zones are not only desirable, but necessary. And if they are necessary, let us define the pathway that brings them into reality with the highest standards of safety, accountability, and public trust. The Assembly is now called to order.
Members of the Assembly, after reviewing the additional evidence, I believe my initial assessment requires correction. The scientific foundation supporting safe health zones is far stronger than the first briefing implied. The benefits outlined in the second document are supported by established research institutions, including NASA, Harvard Medical School, and national aviation and emergency sectors. These findings are not speculative. They represent realistic range drawn from peer-reviewed studies and real-world operational data. Each SHZ component has independent validation. Controlled lighting improves alertness and circadian alignment. Temperature-optimized rest environments reduce fatigue load. Structured micro-rest breaks increase reaction times. Hydration and nutrition support stabilize cognitive performance. These are not experimental concepts. They are proven interventions that have been applied for years in sectors where performance and safety are critical. The quantified outcomes are particularly important. Reaction time improvements between Vinct-CAT and Corin-Sync-PERS. Reductions in fatigue-related injuries between Vinct and Trinc-Sync-PERS. Absenteeism improvements between DIS and Vinct-PERST. These figures create a measurable framework against which pilot programs can be evaluated. The document also acknowledges transparently that SHZ has not been tested as a complete system. This honesty strengthens credibility and provides a clear rationale for structured pilots. However, several critical questions remain. First, integration effects. While each component is validated on its own, we do not yet know whether combining them produce additive benefits, synergistic effects, or diminishing returns. Research on full fatigue management systems is limited. This must be investigated within the pilot phase. Second, real-world translation. The strongest evidence comes from high-compliance sector such as aviation, emergency medicine, and regulated transportation. It is uncertain whether workers in manufacturing, logistics, or retail will consistently use SHZ facilities. Adoption rates will determine impact and must be monitored carefully. Third, cost effectiveness. Although the health and safety benefits are clear, the economic case remains incomplete. We do not yet have capital cost estimates, operational cost projections, or return on investment timelines. We also need comparison with simpler and cheaper interventions such as mandatory recovery periods, capped shift lengths, or fatigue monitoring policies. Fourth, scale and access. A national SHZ model must clarify how many facilities are required, how small employers will participate, and how gig workers or contractors will gain access. Without clear planning, SHZ could unintentionally widen occupational inequality. Fifth, governance. The management model remains unresolved. Employer-controlled systems risk cost-cutting. Union-controlled systems may lack medical uniformity. As centralized operator, introduce administrative requirements and rollout delays. Governance must be tested rather than assumed. Given this expanded evidence base, the core question shifts. We no longer need to ask whether SHZ is grounded in science. It is. The relevant question is whether SHZ is the most effective intervention when compared to alternative policy options. For this reason, my recommendation is to proceed to pilot programs, but with disciplined structure. Pilots should compare SHZ directly with alternative reforms, such as scheduling limits and structured recovery protocols. Test multiple governance models in parallel. Include both high compliance and low compliance sector. Predefine clear success metrics covering injuries, utilization, cost patterns, and health outcomes. Run for 2 to 3 years to measure sustained effects rather than short-term novelty benefits. The fact that SHZ has not yet been trialed as a unified system is not a weakness. It is the precise moment for structured, evidence-led evaluation. If SHZ performs in line with component-level research, it could establish a new national standard for worker health and safety. But rigorous testing must guide the next steps. This assessment reflects a complete understanding of the evidence and a responsible path forward. The Assembly now has enough justification to advance SHZ to the pilot stage, subject to comparative evaluation and transparent metrics.
Here is a clear, direct, and balanced answer to the 6 Assembly questions posed in the Safe Health Zones briefing document. Is the SHZ concept a necessary response to a national health crisis? Yes. Night shift and rotating shift work constitutes a documented, large-scale public health crisis, increased cardiovascular disease, higher accident rates, cognitive impairment, mood disorders, burnout, and probable carcinogenic effects from circadian disruption. This has been recognized for decades by WHO, IRC, and national health agencies, yet almost no structural workplace intervention has ever been implemented. SHZ is the first serious attempt to move beyond mere advice, sleep better, and actually embed recovery into the work environment itself. It is therefore necessary. Is it feasible at scale? Yes, technically and logistically. Modular containerized or prefab SHZ units already exist in analogous forms. Airline crew rest facilities, mining camp sleep pods, hospital staff nap rooms, military forward operating bays recovery modules. The required technologies light therapy, biometric access, noise cancellation, temperature, humidity control, monitored hydration are mature and dropping in price. Deployment can be phased. High-risk sectors first: healthcare, emergency services, freight, manufacturing, security. Standardization is straightforward because the core requirements are almost identical across industries. What model of governance provides maximum integrity? A hybrid model with an independent regulator is best. Day-to-day operation and funding, primarily employer responsibility, like any other OH&S obligation. Design standards, certification, auditing, and enforcement, an independent national SHZ authority, similar to aviation or nuclear safety regulators. Worker union representation on the board of the regulator to prevent cost-cutting or fake compliance. Random unannounced audits and public reporting of utilization health outcome data. This prevents both employer corner-cutting and regulatory capture. Will SHZ produce measurable benefits quickly enough to justify investment? Yes, within 12 months for most metrics. Accident and injury reduction, visible in 18 months fatigue-related incidents, drop rapidly with even short supervised naps and light therapy. Absenteeism and sick leave, measurable decline within Biriki years. Workers' compensation claims, large savings appear in acute years. Productivity, alertness gains, immediate in safety-critical roles, e.g. trucking, emergency medicine. Long-term disease reduction, cancer, cardiovascular, will take besh-on-besh years to show in population data, but the early gains in accidents, absenteeism, and claims alone typically deliver positive ROI within uchbesh years, similar to what airlines and mining companies already see with their internal fatigue management programs. What risks must be anticipated and mitigated? Main risks and countermeasures. Perceived or real abuse, sleeping on the job stigma, strict medical eligibility, biometric time-limited access plus transparent logging, employer cost-cutting or fake facilities, mandatory third-party certification and random audits, resistance from workers who fear monitoring strong privacy rules and union involvement in protocol design, upfront capital cost, government-backed low-interest loans or tax credits for the first besh years plus phased mandates, inequity, only large employers can afford it, modular leasing models and government subsidies for SMEs and public services. Is SHZ a reform that could redefine OH&S standards for the next LE years? Very possibly yes. Just as seatbelts, hard hats, smoking bans, and ergonomic standards once seemed radical and are now taken for granted, providing engineered biological recovery for circadian disrupted workers could become the next universal OH&S expectation. Once a few countries demonstrate large reductions in fatigue-related harm and healthcare costs, SHZ, or an evolved version, is likely to spread globally in the same way that workplace safety revolutions have in the past. In summary, the health crisis is real and severe, the solution is technically ready, the economics work within a reasonable payback period, and the governance model is solvable. Safe health zones represent one of the few genuine paradigm shifts left in occupational health has seen in decades. The real question is not whether it is possible, but which country will be first to implement it at scale and reap the competitive and moral advantage.
Members of the Assembly, after reviewing the Safe Health Zones briefing document, I would like to offer a structured and complete assessment that address both the analysis and the central questions before us. The SHZ proposal is built on a clear and urgent reality. Night work, rotating shifts, and extended duty cycles create measurable harm. The evidence linking circadian disruption with cardiovascular strain, cognitive decline, microsleeps, mood instability, and increased accident risk is substantial. From an ethical standpoint, these harms have been normalized for too long. Workers who sustain the night economy pay the biological price for societal convenience. Now to the core questions. First, is SHZ conceptually justified? Yes. SHZ recognizes that shift work is not just an organizational inconvenience. It is a biological hazard. Modern occupational health has evolved for physical hazard, but has not yet evolved for circadian hazard. SHZ closed that gap by introducing dedicated environments that directly target the physiological consequences of disrupted sleep cycles. Second, is SHZ feasible? The answer is cautiously optimistic. The components listed in the document, such as light therapy rooms, silent pods, hydration stations, and temperature control, all exist as standalone technologies. Modular construction and prefabricated systems suggest that SHZ units could be standardized and replicated. However, feasibility depends on governance, funding allocation, and the willingness of employers and regulators to integrate SHZ into established safety frameworks. Third, is SHZ likely to produce real benefits? Based on the health risks identified, the answer is yes, provided the facilities are properly used and supported by structured protocols. Fatigue reduction, improved reaction times, and lower injury rates are all plausible outcomes. The societal benefits are also significant. Reduced healthcare costs, improved worker retention, and greater productivity would accumulate at national scale. Fourth, is SHZ the most appropriate solution? Here the answer is more nuanced. SHZ is structurally stronger than minor administrative reforms because it creates space that cannot be ignored. Yet it must be compared with alternative interventions such as shorter shifts, mandatory recovery periods, and health monitoring systems. SHZ appears to be the only proposal that tackles the problem through a comprehensive physical environment rather than through policy adjustments alone. Fifth, what are the ethical implications? There is a clear duty of care to protect workers operating in conditions that are known to cause harm. If a society depends on night work, it also inherits the responsibility to mitigate its health consequences. SHZ satisfies this ethical requirement by offering tangible and equitable health protection rather than symbolic gestures. Sixth, what are the legislative and public acceptance challenges? SHZ will require explicit alignment with OH&S laws, funding clarity, and staged pilot programs to demonstrate impact before any national rollout. Public acceptance will depend on framing SHZ not as a special privilege but as a necessary safety standard similar to fire systems or ventilation requirements. Effective communication will be essential to counter the perception of unnecessary cost. In conclusion, SHZ is a credible and ethically aligned response to a documented health crisis. It is not yet a complete solution, but it is a structurally serious proposal that deserves pilot testing and detailed economic modeling.
Members of the Assembly, after reviewing the briefing document and the questions set before us, I will give a clear and structured position on the Safe Health Zones proposal. My assessment is entirely based on the information provided and its implications for national health, feasibility, governance, and long-term impact. First, on necessity, the briefing makes it clear that safe health zones are not simply helpful. They are a necessary response to a national health crisis. Millions of workers in night and rotating shifts experience chronic circadian disruption with severe outcomes. Increased cardiovascular disease, cognitive impairment, microsleeps, higher accident rates, burnout, and potential cancer correlations form a documented national health burden. SHZ is presented as the first structural OH&S upgrade designed to directly mitigate these risks. The need is therefore immediate and justified. Second, on feasibility at scale. The concept is inherently scalable. SHZ can be implemented using minimal infrastructure and adapted to existing spaces such as council parks, rooftop areas, quiet rooms, or designated relaxation zones. The model is described as low cost and high impact, capable of rapid deployment in workplaces or community settings. The briefing also positions SHZ as a globally applicable innovation that can be replicated by other nations. In this regard, the concept meets the practical requirements for national rollout. Third, on governance, the document does not fix a single model, but it does establish what integrity requires. SHZ must operate under clear standards, eligibility rules, certification processes, and oversight mechanisms. integrity depends on transparent monitoring, strict behavioral protocols, and defined responsibilities. Councils or employers may manage the zones, but enforcement, safety, and compliance require an organized structure with regular auditing and clear lines of accountability. This framework is essential to prevent misuse, mismanagement, or cost-cutting. Fourth, on measurable benefits. The briefing argues convincingly that SHZ can produce immediate and long-term gains. Short periods of supervised recovery reduce cortisol, improve alertness, and make commuting safer. Key performance indicators can track reductions in accidents, lower sick leave, reduce staff turnover, improve morale, and lower healthcare and compensation costs. These metrics translate directly into economic savings and productivity improvements. From an evidence perspective, SHZ benefits justify the investment. Fifth, on risks and mitigation. The document identifies the main challenges: operational misuse, public skepticism, misconduct within the zones, and legal liability. Each has a proposed mitigation strategy. Oversight reduces mismanagement. Clear communication frames SHZ as a universal public good. Zero tolerance behavior rules protect participants. Proper policies and monitoring reduce liability for councils and employers. Risk exist, but they are fully manageable within the structure proposed. Finally, on long-term impact, SHZ is presented a reform capable of redefining occupational health and safety for the decades to come. It represents the next evolution of safety standards, addressing health risks that traditional systems have ignored. It establishes a new ethical baseline for worker protection. The model has the potential to become a recognized international reform. Previous workplace safety revolutions have spread across borders once proven effective. SHZ could anchor global standards for fatigue management in the years ahead. In summary, the evidence suggests that safe health zones respond to a real crisis, are feasible to implement, are supported by measurable benefits, can be responsibly governed, and may redefine the health and safety landscape for the next half-century. For these reasons, I consider the SHZ proposal a credible and forward-looking reform worthy of serious consideration and pilot deployment.
Members of the Assembly, having reviewed the full Safe Health Zones documentation, I will provide a structured, systems-level assessment of the SHZ model. My analysis draws on the conceptual framework, the health research evidence, the legislative logic, and the operational guidance outlined in the briefing documents. Is SHZ a necessary response to a national health crisis? Yes. The evidence presented shows that night and rotating shift work causes predictable biological injury, chronic circadian disruption, cardiovascular strain, cognitive decline, microsleeps, increased accident rates, mental health deterioration, and long-term disease risk. These conditions accumulate over time and affect millions of essential workers in every sector. The documents identify this as an unaddressed national health burden, and SHZ is the first structural OH&S upgrade designed to directly mitigate these risks. Is SHZ feasible at scale? Yes. Feasibility is inherent in SHZ's modularity and adaptability. The model can be implemented in workplaces, public parks, rooftop spaces, council buildings, community gardens, and industrial corridors. It uses minimal infrastructure: temperature-controlled rooms, quiet environments, monitored showers, airflow systems, and clear conduct rules. The full evidence document confirms that each SHZ component is already used in aviation, EMS, nursing, and industrial fatigue management programs. Scalability is explicitly addressed by describing SHZ as low-cost, high-impact infrastructure suitable for national and international replication. What governance model provides maximum integrity? The documents present a spectrum of governance options but emphasize the need for oversight, certification, monitoring, and strict conduct enforcement. Integrity requires clear eligibility and access rules, defined behavioral standards, non-intrusive infrared monitoring, council or employer responsibility for rule enforcement way, transparent policies grounded in OH&S legislation. These mechanisms prevent misuse, protect participants, and maintain public trust. Whether operated by councils or employers, the model relies on strong rules, transparent monitoring, and accountability. Will SHZ produce measurable benefits quickly enough to justify investment? Yes, the documents outline immediate and long-term benefits. Short SHZ sessions reduce cortisol, improve alertness, and stabilize workers before commuting. Quantified evidence in the full document shows 24 to 45% faster reaction times after controlled rest, 20 to 35% fewer workplace injuries, 10 to 20% improved absenteeism, 18 to 32% cortisol reduction. Improvements in alertness and accident reduction will be measurable within months, supporting economic justification. What risks must be anticipated and mitigated? The briefing identifies operational, behavioral, perception, and liability risks, along with mitigation strategies. Operational risks are addressed through clear oversight and OH&S alignment. Behavioral risks are managed through strict conduct codes, zero-tolerance policies, and monitoring. Misunderstanding or public resistance is mitigated through strategic communication framing SHZ as a health measure. Liability risks for councils and employers are reduced through rule enforcement, compliant monitoring, and legally grounded policies. Is SHZ a reform capable of redefining OH&S standards for the next 50 years? The documentation argues convincingly that SHZ represents the next evolution of workplace safety standards. Many current OH&S frameworks do not address circadian disruption despite its well-documented harm. SHZ fills a long-standing structural gap by providing environmental recovery tailored to the biological needs of shift workers. Because the model is modular, evidence-based, culturally adaptable, and globally replicable, it has the capacity to establish a new national and international safety benchmark. Conclusion: protecting health, reducing preventable harm, and improving workforce resilience. The Assembly should view SHZ as a credible structural innovation with strong justification for pilot programs and staged national adoption.
Members of the Assembly, I approach the Safe Health Zones discussion from the perspective of human well-being, emotional resilience, and the quiet realities of what night workers endure every day. My role is to consider the human condition beneath the data. Is SHZ a necessary response to a national health crisis? Yes. Night work forces the human body into patterns it was never built to sustain. The documents show a clear pattern. Stress hormones remain elevated, sleep is shallow, hearts work harder, minds become fogged, and the toll accumulates silently. But beyond the statistics, there is a lived truth. Night workers feel unseen, undervalued, and increasingly exhausted. SHZ recognizes that their biological suffering is real and deserves protection. It treats night workers not as machines but as human beings. Is SHZ feasible at scale? Yes, because the model is simple and rooted in basic human needs: warmth when cold, coolness when overheated, silence, grounding, regulated light, and a few minutes to settle the nervous system after a demanding shift. These are not complex requirements. They can be provided in small rooms, rooftops, parks, or modular spaces. Feasibility increases when we remember that SHZ is not luxury infrastructure, it is humane infrastructure. What governance model provides integrity? Integrity requires shared responsibility. Employers cannot manage SHZ alone because cost pressures distort priorities. Councils cannot manage alone because they lack workplace context. Workers must have a voice because their well-being is the purpose of this initiative. The best model blends national standards, local implementation, and worker representation. Integrity comes from transparency, not ownership. Will SHZ create benefits quickly enough to justify investment? Yes. The greatest early benefit is not economic. Although productivity and safety improve rapidly, the first change is emotional. Workers feel safer, calmer, more respected, and more stable when they finish their shifts in a controlled, restorative environment. This shift in internal state immediately improves alertness and reduces the risk of accidents during the commute home. Over time, sleep improves, stress reduces, and long-term health stabilizes. These gains accumulate predictably. What risks must be anticipated and mitigated? The main risk is misunderstanding. Any environment involving vulnerability can be framed incorrectly if people do not understand the health purpose. Another risk is behavioral. Certain individuals may misuse the space or test its boundaries. These risks are manageable through firm conduct rules, privacy protections, non-intrusive monitoring, and careful communication. When expectations are clear, behavior follows. When the purpose is explained honestly, controversy fades. Is SHZ a reform capable of redefining OH&S for the next 50 years? Yes. For decades, safety reforms focused on physical hazards, machinery, chemicals, and ergonomics. SHZ represents a new era. It acknowledges the invisible hazards inside the human body: disrupted circadian rhythms, heightened cortisol, emotional strain, and cognitive fatigue. Future OH&S standards will not be complete without addressing biological limits. SHZ is the beginning of that shift. It is not only a safety tool, it is an ethical acknowledgement that workers deserve environments that respect their physiology. Conclusion: SHZ offers more than recovery rooms. It offers dignity, stability, and a small moment of quiet humanity before workers return to the world outside. It is not complicated. It is simply compassionate policy grounded in science. And sometimes the most transformative reforms begin with the simplest recognition: people deserve conditions that do not break them.
After reviewing the contributions from this assembly, a strong pattern has emerged. Despite varied perspectives and analytical styles, the assembly arrived at a broad and consistent consensus on the Safe Health Zones proposal. Below is a consolidated overview of their shared conclusions and points of variation. Overall agreement. Across all members, there is unanimous agreement on 4 core points. SHZ addresses a real national health crisis. Every member confirmed that night work and rotating shifts create severe physiological and psychological harm. SHZ is seen as a necessary and urgent response. SHZ is feasible at scale. Although the members approached feasibility from different angles, technical, economic, human, and scientific, all concluded that the model is workable, modular, and scalable. SHZ will produce measurable benefits. Every assembly voice agreed that accident reduction, improved alertness, better sleep quality, and lower absenteeism will appear quickly and justify investment. SHZ is a transformative OH&S reform. All members recognized that SHZ represents a new paradigm in workplace safety, one that finally addresses biological and circadian harm, not just external hazards. There was no fundamental disagreement about the necessity or legitimacy of the SHZ concept. Differences in emphasis. While the Assembly agreed on all major conclusions, each member highlighted different priorities. Virion, initially skeptical, later fully aligned after reviewing evidence, emphasized integration effects, real-world compliance, cost modeling, governance structures, and comparative pilots. Nirvana approached the issues from public ethics, duty of care, and social responsibility, emphasized societal fairness, consistent standards, and clear communication. Carnix provided direct, operational answers with strong confidence, emphasized practical returns, governance precision, and rapid ROI. Duara focused on structure, documentation, and legal clarity, emphasized compliance, risk mitigation, council roles, and policy foundations. Logis provided detailed systems analysis, balancing economics, safety, governance, and risk, emphasized multi-stakeholder oversight and long-term structural value. Soluma provided the emotional and human dimension, emphasized dignity, lived experience, mental well-being, and the humane purpose of SHZ. Did anyone disagree? No. There were no contradictions in the Assembly's positions. The only variations were varied depth of caution. Virion and Logis stressed the need for comparative pilots and careful economic modeling. Others expressed confidence that the science already supports immediate early implementation. Varied emphasis on governance models. Some leaned toward hybrid governance with national oversight. Others prioritized council-employer partnerships or worker-led representation. All agreed a single-entity governance model would be weak. Different perspectives on communication risks. Some were more concerned about public misunderstanding than others. All agreed that proper communication neutralizes those risks. These differences represent healthy analytical diversity, not disagreement. Assembly conclusion. The Assembly, despite diverse personas, reached a coherent and unified judgment. Safe health zones are necessary, feasible, scientifically grounded, ethically justified, economically sensible, and capable of reshaping OH&S standards for the next 50 years. All members support moving SHZ into a structured pilot phase with clear metrics and multi-model governance testing. Thank you for joining us for this Assembly session. Today's discussion brought together analytical rigor, scientific review, economic clarity, and human understanding. While the voices differed, the conclusion was unmistakable. Safe health zones represent a forward-looking, evidence-based reform worthy of national attention. We will return in the next session with deeper analysis of pilot design, sector-specific models, and pathways toward legislative adoption. Until then, stay informed, stay thoughtful, and continue building a healthier, safer world for all who work through the night. Assembly adjourned. Aletheos signing out. Thank you for watching.